When we were colonists and the king wanted to raise money from us, he and the parliament had ingenious ways of doing it. And one of the ways that they raised money was to enact the Stamp Act. And the Stamp Act required that every piece of paper in your possession, a book, a pamphlet, a lease, a deed, a mortgage, even a poster you were going to nail to a tree, had to have a stamp on it with the king's image. You think it was rough going to a post office? This was a foreign post office run by the king in the colonies, and you had to go there and get these stamps. Question: how did the king know that his image was on every piece of paper in your possession? Answer: the Parliament enacted something called the Writs of Assistance Act. This horrible piece of legislation authorized British soldiers to write their own search warrants. So a British soldier would show up at your door in New York or New Jersey or Pennsylvania or Delaware and handwrite out authority which authorized him to enter your house, ostensibly to look for the stamps. There was no judge involved. There was no evidence that you didn't have the stamps. There was no evidence that you had any documents that required the stamps. He was just permitted to enter, and while there, take what he wanted. Rum from the islands without a tax stamp, you can't prove you paid the tax on it, we're going to confiscate it. Furniture from the mother country, you can't prove you paid a tariff on it, we're going to confiscate it. By the way, we have 15 soldiers that need a good hot meal and a place to stay tonight. We're taking over your farmhouse. Enough was enough. We fought a revolution. We won the revolution. We wrote a constitution. And the whole purpose of the Constitution was to keep the government off the people's backs. But my friends, assaults by fanatics on our safety does not justify assaults by the government on our freedom. The Bush administration went to the Congress and said we have to have the Patriot Act. And we need it right now because the terrorists are under every bedpost and behind every toilet and inside every refrigerator. And if we don't have these powers, we will not be kept safe. And so the Patriot Act, which is 315 pages long, which basically amends hundreds and hundreds of other statutes. So in order to read the Patriot Act, you not only need the act itself in front of you, you need the entire United States Code, which is about the size of 8 or 10 sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. I've read it 3 times, and it takes about 20 hours to read each time. The Patriot Act was posted on the House intranet, the internal internet, to which only members of the House of Representatives and their senior staff have access, for 15 minutes before the vote. There was no debate on the floor of the House, and the Patriot Act was enacted. There was a debate on the floor of the Senate. Only one senator conceded that he read it, Paul Wellstone, who's now dead, and he's one of the 2 who voted against it. A half dozen courageous members of the House of Representatives, like Ron Paul, said, how the heck can you expect me to vote on something that you won't let me read? The Patriot Act lets federal agents write their own search warrants. We have come 360 degrees from fighting a revolution against a tyrannical government because it dispatched its agents to write their own search warrants, to establishing a constitution which assured us that that would never happen and required that when the government wants anything from you, it has to go to a judge, to popularly electing members of Congress who would vote to gut the Constitution and remove the second most important right in it, and let federal agents write their own search warrants. And that's what this monstrosity of the so-called Patriot Act does. When I was giving a speech similar to this in another state in the Midwest. There were a lot of members of Congress there, about a half a dozen of whom came up to me afterwards and said, we voted for the Patriot Act. We didn't know that it allowed agents to write their own search warrants. We never heard that before. Now, you then ask them a question. Lawyers like to ask questions that they already know the answer to. Question, did you read it? No, we didn't. Question, did you read anything before you voted on it? Answer, yes. Question, what did you read? We read a summary of it. Question, prepared by whom? By the Justice Department. Well, of course the Justice Department is not going to tell you the powers that you're giving to it to make it the decider and it the person and entity that can violate privacy. So these sad, sorry people who took an oath to uphold the Constitution in their blindness and in their fear enacted legislation that would subvert the Constitution.